things have changed a lot, I think.
So yeah, we're live on YouTube. Welcome everyone. We have Roisin here, and yeah, it's a filmmaker, director, and yeah, take it away, Roisin. I have
Hi. Hello to everyone out there, and thanks for joining this evening for her International Film Festival, and I'm delighted to be here. And please do send in any questions or click on and say hello if you're there. Lovely to, I like chatting to people's faces if possible, so you're more than welcome. It depends on how comfortable you are with whatever you are. Hey, Kelly.
Hello. Thanks for doing this.
Not at all. Thank you for being here. So I was just going to start out really just chatting about how I kind of began. And I didn't go to film school. I didn't go through and train in that way. There was Dunleary was available. It was there at the time, but there wasn't really, it didn't feel like something that I could access from where I was. It wasn't something that was ever suggested in a million years in school or anything like that. But I did passionately love theatre, and I always was really, really interested in theatre. So that's kind of the direction I went. So I went in and did a diploma in theatre studies, and then I went on and became a theatre technician. So I did lighting design, mainly a lot of stage direction, and then went on to direct and work in a lot of ensemble theatre, which was an absolutely incredible place to get to know other actors, people who are within the industry, but also working with actors. And I think that's a big part of what's important to me in filmmaking is the direct work with actors and being collaborative. And theatre, certainly in ensemble theatre, is very collaborative. And I kind of just transferred that across because nothing gets made by one person and nothing happens with one person. Every single person who's involved has something to add, something to bring to the table. And I think that's, for me, the most important point. There's a DP there. I'm not a DP. The person who's the DP is good at being a DP. I am there to work with them to get an overall picture. So I suppose that's really how I traveled in, and it's probably why I work the way I do in a lot of ways as well. And I first shot on film. All my early experience, even in cutting, would have been with a blade, not with a computer. So I'm old. So I've been around a long time. And I think that I worked with a lot of comedians as well, a lot of musicians. So I think working with all those different people gave me the opportunity to absorb information from them over the years. And that's really, I find, was really, really helpful for me. I worked in theatre for about 13 years or so, and then I had children. And unfortunately, children and film and theatre can be a little bit of a difficult juggle, and you don't really, certainly now that I think there's more support, it's not there yet. There's still an awful long way to go, and I'm still hearing the same stories as I had 17, 18 years ago, which is most unfortunate. But I think there's the beginning of changes happening to make things more accessible to people who are carers, who have, those responsibilities in their lives. So I'm hoping that a lot more will happen on that in the future. But yeah, so being a team player was a really important part. I learned a lot about that in theatre and ensemble work. I also spent an awful lot of time working with actors. And ultimately, that's the most important thing. People's performance and what they bring on screen with script is what you'll be judged on. You're telling a story, and they are the people who are going to tell that story. To begin, when you first start out, when you first sit down with a script, with the script writer, and you're going through each moment in time, you start to visualize. Well, I certainly start to visualize how I see it. I see it in film in my head. And then even when it comes down to breaking down a script and tone and color and all of those things are something that, wrongly or rightly, I have a very, very strong vision of very, very quickly. And sometimes that is wrong. Like sometimes I'll sit down with our department or with someone afterwards and they'll be like, oh, well, I was thinking this. And you'll go, oh my God, that's amazing. And that's what I mean by people bringing, every single individual bringing something to the table. And I've directed scripts of my own, and I've directed scripts that were written by other people. And I find a difference there as well. And I kind of like other people directing my scripts and directing other people's scripts, because again, it allows you to come from the outside a little bit. So, and sometimes when you're writing, you can be incredibly attached to moments or scenes or times. So, and they could be wrong. It's not, I'm not a genius and can work out everything in my head in advance. Things change as you go along. And so that would be a big part. So I suppose first of all, sitting down with the script, going through the script, breaking it down. If you've written it yourself, obviously you're there. You might speak to your producer on that, or you might, speak to, whoever's there or whoever's been developing, or even sending it out to friends and chatting to friends and going through. Or else if it's someone else's script, sit down with the writer and spend a little bit of time going through, because sometimes things aren't on paper. You can pick up your own idea of what situations and tone, etc. are. But sometimes it's good to, just spend that little bit of time and just reach out to the writer and have a chat about where it came from in the first place. And because sometimes things can be lost in rewrites. So I have in the past gone back and read like a first or second draft, and it might be the shooting script might be the 10th draft, but sometimes it's good to go back and read a previous or an early draft, because sometimes the soul is in a different place. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but sometimes a really early draft will actually have the soul of what the film is. And there's problems, and that's why it's been redrafted. But it just helps, I think, to find that. And I think it's almost always like in an early draft. So I think for me, that helps. If it's someone else's writing, it helps for me to see that and to be able to read through that and find what that moment or what that bit of magic is. Because I know myself from writing, that sometimes you can lose that along the way, or sometimes it changes along the way, and which is fine. That's, but it just, it's just one of those things that I think is really, it's helpful for me anyway, when I'm setting out. Then after kind of you've worked out all that and you're sitting down, it's always really helpful to have a read through. And if possible, and I think one of the things that I find very difficult now, I think things are so rushed in comparison to what they might have been years ago. Like when I first worked on film or within, and I was doing all sorts of stuff. I did art department, I did lighting, did props, did, what I mean, whatever was there. Like it was always, there's low budget indie. So you could have 10 different jobs, which I think is great, because it's always good to work all the jobs. And sorry, I've forgotten my train of thought now totally. But we would have probably, when shooting on film, you spent an awful lot of time in pre-production because you couldn't reshoot. Usually if it was low budget, you got one go. So you got one shot, unless there was a hair in the gate, it was going to be used. So there was an attitude towards every moment, I think, and its importance in what you were doing. That meant that financially, no one was going to, you can go, oh, we'll go again on that, or we'll do it from here, or we'll do it from there. That wasn't the way it worked. And sometimes I feel like pre-production isn't given the weight that it deserves, because when you have that time with cast and crew in advance, all the little kinks and all the little things that can happen on set are already worked out. You've already been there. If there's a line that someone finds difficult to say, if there's a phrase that doesn't work for an actor, if there's a decision made on a costume, if there's a decision made on, whatever it may be, if you have that little bit of time in pre-production, you're not going to walk on set and be like, oh no, I don't have a prop that would work so well for this scene, or I don't have, the actors are pitched at two slightly different levels, or something clashes. Our art department have their time to really plan out exactly what you're seeing, because every single moment is a picture. An audience watch that and they take a huge amount of information in. So it matters what's on the table. It matters what's on the counter behind them. It matters what the actor is wearing. It matters. All those things really matter. And they take planning and they take time. And the people who are there to do that, to do all those things, are incredibly important, and they're artists, and they deserve to have the time they need to create what they need to create for that to carry through. And I think if you're directing, it's one of, literally you're kind of a sounding board for the talent all around you to a certain extent. You're there to bring all the different pieces together. And yes, you'll obviously have your overall vision of what you want to see, and your own little movie that's played out in your head 1,000 times. But all the people that are around you to do that are there to add to what you're making rather than anything else. And I think particularly for actors, and it's one of the things that I see an awful lot, is for day players, it's very difficult for them to know where to pitch their performance if they're walking on to something that's already been going for like 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, you know what I mean? And I think it's a really hard thing to do to actors coming in, to not give them opportunity. And it's one of the things that, again, that I think is really important, is to give that time. And if you're tearing through the script without working all that stuff out in advance, you're not going to get the performance, or it may be pitched at a different level, and you're going to pay for that in post-production. Like, there's just no two ways about it. You're going, things that will always go wrong, no matter how well you plan, things will always go wrong. The hiccups are going to happen, whatever. But you can manage them when it's small things or different things as you go, like a location change. Yeah, oh my God, it seems terrible. But if there's 10 things that are going wrong because you haven't planned, that's when you're going to have a problem. And there's nothing more depressing than sitting in an edit suite and going, you're still going to do that no matter what, but there is nothing more of something that's totally preventable. And you owe it to the people who are working around you, or working with you, and who are putting in so much work, time, talent, and effort. You owe it to them to make sure that it's really properly planned, and you've done all the legwork that you possibly can in advance, to make the end product, which is what it is ultimately, as good as it possibly can be, and be a showcase for them, be something they're really proud of at the end too. So that would be probably where I come. So I'm into collaboration. I think everyone comes with lots of talents. I am there to direct the actors. I'm not there to direct a camera. I'm not there to direct, you know what I mean? When I'm on set, all that stuff should be finished. That's all pre-production stuff, and to make it a space and a location and a time for the actors to do their very best, performance wise, and work with each other, because it's incredibly difficult. It's a hard job, and it can, people can be very, very nervous, and it doesn't matter how experienced people are. It doesn't matter if they've been doing it for 20 years or 5 minutes, or they're not actors, or they're kids that are coming in to do a performance. It's a tough job, and that has to be appreciated, because ultimately they're on the screen. So to me, that's probably when you're on set, that's the most important thing to me. And I try, obviously I've been in situations where, you're rushing and you don't have much time and you don't have any money, or you have very little money, and you're trying to do your best. And it can be really stressful, but you just can't bring that to the actors as much as is physically possible. You can't bring that to the actors, because you need to just let them be who they are, and not allow other things to happen on set either. That's first ADs are amazing. I love first ADs because they filter everything all the time, as well as doing their job, being a filter for everyone, and makeup as well. Makeup and hair are genius, because they allow people to go through any issues or any problems or any nervousness they have, and as well as doing their job. And there's a lot of people who are doing that, who are doing all these jobs on top that you mightn't necessarily recognize, but they are, and they're keeping a flood away from you if you're directing, and they're keeping a flood away from the actors or the DP or whoever else is around, and they're firefighting all around you, and you mightn't even know it, but they're brilliant. And I think that's, so pre-production, lots of pre-production. Don't leave it to the last minute. Spend your time planning for everything, knowing that even after planning for everything, things will go wrong, and you will end up having to do a few firefights, but there's no harm in that. I think it's a little bit of that is healthy. So, the casting and working with actors again, it's like casting again is just huge. I think sometimes hugely underappreciated, because it's not only casting the right person, and I think that it's, again, with actors, something that can be really hard. It's like they're like, oh, I don't understand what, and they're not cast for something, and it's usually something stupid. A lot of the time, it could be this person doesn't match with that person, all this sort of stuff goes on. But it's, I think when you're working in casting, and again, the actor's done a huge amount of work coming in, but something, I think a lot of time you just know, and it mightn't be who you have in your head at all. You might have a vision in your head of what you think the character is going to be, and then someone comes in and they take the part, if you know what I mean, rather than are given. It's just, there's something in them that just is the character, that is right for it, and that it happens regularly, and you can be kind of surprised yourself. But we're very lucky, because we've amazing casting directors in Ireland, really, really amazing, and they're so in tune with script and with the directors they work with, that really they make life very, very easy for everyone involved. And it's a real talent. And yeah, so it's something I really like. I actually really like casting. I like sitting down and meeting actors, because it's, you don't know everyone. Like, I mean, no one's going to, so it's always really nice to sit down and chat to people. And even if it's not this thing that's right for them, they stick with you. And sometimes you find yourself going home and writing whole things just about the people that you know that might be for something else along the way. But the other thing, I suppose, with performance wise is I'm always far more interested in people when they're not talking. So for me, reaction is far more powerful most of the time than words will ever be. And it's something that I think you can be very, very aware of. And again, give the time too. And I have a habit, if any actors are there, I have a habit of running long. So I won't shout cut. I'll leave the camera rolling longer than feels necessary, probably to a point where it becomes uncomfortable and no one quite knows what's going on, and then give it a cut. Because sometimes when you leave something run long, you get a reaction that you may not have gotten otherwise. And I've used them, like they've been in final edits. And particularly depending on the scenes you're doing, I suppose, with a lot of the stuff that I've done, like sometimes you're looking for vulnerability, a confusion, all these different things. And sometimes it's those moments that you get in the silence that make a huge difference to what you're doing overall, to the picture you want to paint. And I just feel like you're telling a story, and reaction from the audience perspective tells as much of the story as any action ever will. And so I always like to make sure that is there, because again, you don't ever want to be lost. And even when it gets to cutaways, like even it's just, have your list of cutaways that you might want, have your list of moments. If you want to show what they're seeing or what they're looking at, if that's like a bird in a tree or their own shoes looking down or whatever it is, have your list and be really, because again, it's something that you don't want to not have when you get to edit. It's usually quicker, easier and cheaper to get it while you're shooting than it ever is. And don't overload your schedule. That's the because again, it's something that I've seen over and over again, where the schedule's overloaded, and I've been guilty of myself. So that's why I can say it. No one is going to work at their best at a level of pressure where it's something is unachievable, where you end up missing things, you end up skipping things that you will ultimately need, or even if you don't have them and you have to, cut around what you're missing, you'll regret not giving that little bit of time as you go through. And again, that's preparation. That's just listing out everything you can, you have your general coverage, you have this, that, and the other, but just all your little, all those little moments. And some of them are POVs, and they don't take that long. They're not, when a scene is set up, it's not generally not going to take that long to get them, but not having them can cost you an awful lot of time in post-production, in the dreaded post-production. And give time to sound. Always give time to sound for wild tracks and to make sure, because again, what you hear is in some ways more important. I think people get more thrown off by sound. Sound isn't than they ever do by picture. People will accept a lot with picture, but sound is the sound. If something is wrong sound wise, it can really kind of throw you out of what you're watching. So that would be. Does anyone have any questions or anything so far, or if there's anything?
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about like pre-production, which I think I totally agree with from my work and like different projects that I've done. I think preparation is key. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about read-throughs. I know that read-throughs typically happen when you have a bit bigger budgets and more time. So I'm wondering if you could talk about your experience with read-throughs from the director's perspective, but then also rehearsals, not like aside from the read-throughs as well.
Well, for like, I do think read-throughs are really important, but actually both for writers and for the director and for everyone, and you know what I mean, and for the actors as well, because something like you can peg away at a script and you can have a very strong idea of how it works and how it's going to be and how you're going visually what you're going to see, and then when you hear it back, sometimes you can be like, oh, actually that doesn't, you know what I mean, it's it can change your opinion. And if you have the actors that are cast, even more so. And like, I mean, as a writer, I do tend to write, and how would I describe it? Like a sentence will be written in a very specific way. It's almost like in music, you know, it's that a sentence and how a sentence is constructed makes a difference to another sentence further down. Like it can be quite specific. And then other times that it wouldn't be like that at all. And sometimes I've found that a word, or if a sentence is difficult, it throws off the way the sentence is constructed. You know what I mean? It throws off a beat, or it throws off the meaning slightly. So I think that can be huge, like as a writer and as a director. I think it's really important if you can at all, like even if it is over Zoom, preferably with the actors if you can. But like, I mean, we all know we have no money and we have to go make stuff, and everything is like quicker, faster, cheaper. And it can be a huge mistake, like it really can. Because how an actor who's cast in that role says something can change an awful lot right the way through. So I've been lucky enough to have read-throughs. I'm lucky enough to be able to, you know, ring around, get people in and do read-throughs. Some of it, not all the time, but some of the time. And I've personally found it very eye-opening, because what your interpretation is versus what the actor's interpretation is can be different. And you kind of need to know that in advance of walking onto a set, you know, and having that opportunity to be in a room or on a Zoom or whatever way it is and have a read through. And for the actors themselves to be able to have a little bit of a chat and a little bit of a discussion around moments and beats and times and interpretations is really important. Because again, like, you don't want to end up on set and two people have very different interpretations of what's happening within a scene. And it delays, or someone feels uncomfortable, or they feel like their view isn't valid because someone else's view is more, so talking through those things, I think, is really important if you can. And I do think it's a mistake not to give the time if it's at all possible.
Do you also give during a read through, if you felt that maybe the actor wasn't seeing eye to eye with the structure, the tone, the pacing, would you give notes?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, like, everyone has to have their own, everyone will bring something to it, but ultimately you have to make it cohesive. That's your, you know what I mean? And that's everything from the color, the lighting, the how something is framed, all the way down to the edit. It has to be cohesive. So if you're in a situation where the actor's interpretation is different to your interpretation, that might work. It might be you could be sitting there and going, actually, do you know what they're doing with it? That's better. That works this way, and that's going to, but if it's not going to work, like, that's what you're there to do. You know what I mean? You have to kind of go through that and see why. And I mean, it is going to happen. Like, it's going to happen that people's interpretations are different. And I remember one particular project, the actor had to be lying right the way through the whole film, more or less. They were pretending to be something they weren't. And we were all sitting there going, so you're pretending, so it should be acting as if you're acting, or play it straight. And it was a thing of sitting down and going, well, no, you should try and play it straight, as if you're, because the character needs to be convincing enough right the way through for the audience, as well as his co-actor, to believe that he's being genuine. So it was, it's a simple thing, but it was like a really interesting discussion to have. And it was all worked out well between the actors and director. And that's important. And like, actors want to be directed. They don't want to be like, just walk on and not be given any, and I think you need to sit down and go, this is where we're at. And again, especially for the day players, or a smaller part, or because you're not going to be shooting in sequence most of the time. So even if they know the script backwards and they've been through it, you're still going to be sitting down and going, this is where we are. This is the moment in time. This is what's happened before, and finding those feelings and emotions that will work parallel of their personal feelings and emotions that will work parallel with the character and with the part, with them, because what they're doing already is such a big job. That everything you can do to make that as easy as possible is going to be a gain. And yeah, no, I'd always give notes. In general, I find I learn more from actors sitting there through a read through than I'm necessarily going to give them. We sit there and you leave it easy. Not actually, I would never give notes while we're actually physically doing it. It will be afterwards and privately, like, not in front of a room. Just take little notes, and then if you get a second read through, great, and or chat about it that way. But often, like, sometimes people stop themselves, like, people stop themselves during a read through and go, well, I think this is this way. What and they'll have that discussion, which is fine. It's okay, or have the chat afterwards, and people will work as a group. Because usually, if you're making something together, if you're making a film together, there has to be a level of trust. So a lot of the time, people are happy enough to talk with each other about interpretation and again, what they're doing, and pitch and tone and all those things that, you know, are going to make a huge difference to the end product. So that would be for me anyway. The way I like to, but I do think ultimately actors in general want to be given direction. They want to be given freedom to explore, but you know, ultimately they need to. You need to make sure that the entire thing is coming together, that everyone is kind of playing off the same sheet. You know, you don't one person playing Guns N' Roses and someone else playing Beethoven. Everyone has to be playing the same tune to a certain extent. So that would be how I feel.
I do have another question. I don't want to. I don't want to be the just like taking over here, but just based on another thing that you said, kind of going off of what you were talking about with shooting out of sequence, which I know makes more sense for scheduling and everything. But I'm wondering about your own experience with that as a director. How do you manage to understand like the arc of every scene, the beats of every scene, like within your own head, and stay like organized with your own direction while you're shooting maybe like the opening scene and then the end scene on the same day? Like, what is your process like for that, and like your organization on set look like?
Yeah, it just is that. It's literally, you know, it's breaking it down. Every scene is separate. You know, you have your overall vision of what's going on, but every scene is broken down as an individual, as a separate thing in its own right. So if you're going in to shoot, you know, a midpoint, you know, it's just pre-planning. It's just making sure you know exactly where you are, and having each scene, almost shooting them as little individual films, you know what I mean? But but so well planned. It has to be, I mean, you know, overall visually what you're trying to say. So there's like one film I was doing, and the lead character is just very, very slightly looked down on right the way through, up until his moment of realization, his moment of growth. So every shot is shot from just very slightly above instead of dead on, and then when that changes, it's just shot from very, very slightly below. And so you have to have that. You have to have the idea of what way the whole thing is going to work together as a jigsaw, but each individual piece you also have to be really, really clear about what you're getting and how it's going to cut together and be beside the next one. So yeah, no, it's it's kind of it's weird. And I know I don't think I've ever shot anything. Have I? I don't think I've ever gotten to shoot anything in full sequence, like from start to finish. I think anything I've ever has always been at least a little, like you'll always try, like you'll do your absolute best to be able to do it as much as possible, because it's easier for everyone if it's, you know, as close to sequence as possible. But like with locations, you just can't. It's just not, you know. It's just not always going to be possible, you know. If you have one day in one location, which is in the film 4 times, you're not going to be able to go back and set up and do all that stuff. It's just not practical, you know. But yeah, ideally it would be wonderful. Especially when you have to do things like get people to grow like their beard out or cut their hair and stuff like that, because that has happened where you're there going, because continuity wise it's like, oh no, you know. When it's like, no, you're telling people they can't shave for like 3 weeks, and then you're sitting there going, because if anything goes wrong, you're back to, and then you're trying to like dot in or get makeup to do something like that, which is it never is going to work the way, you know, the way it would. So then you have to start getting clever about how you're shooting it, so you're not seeing light reflection and in hair and all. it just brings a whole load of other problems on top of it. It would be great to be able to do things in sequence, but it rarely happens, unfortunately, even if it's, you know, even with shorts, even with small films. You do your best, but yeah, it's
And so what would your notes look like for days like that, where you are in the same location and have 4 scenes that are shot there over the course of the film?
Well, you see, what I write up is like, a lot of it is visually camera notes, you know what I mean? It's, you know, what shots I want to cover the scene that I'm covering, you know what I mean? Because I think, you know, I know it's working with the actor, I think has to be kind of a little bit separate to that, you know, and the DP already has those, like they're all done in advance. And then it's really from the actor's point of view, to be honest with you, because that's who's changing, that's who's jumping in a lot of ways, you know. Everything else is kind of practical, and you can have that figured out mostly. So it's really about the actor and spending that little bit of time going, okay, this is where we are now, this has just happened, you know, this is, you know, and having those chats. And I've worked a lot with young people, and it's fine, again, it's finding those little parallels in their own lives. And it sounds terrible, but trying to get inside their head a little bit and just find those little moments for them, that give them the confidence to go out and recreate. And always, like, and again, it's try not to do too many takes of anything, because I think it really wears people out, and that it gets underestimated sometimes, you know. And I've seen actors treated like props on set, and it's not pleasant, you know, because they're bringing a level of energy to every take, and you know it when you're there and you're looking through the monitor or you're watching them. The second you get the shot you want, it's instant. It's just like, oh, and you get so excited, but you have to stay quiet and pretend like it's fine. But and it's not. It's like it's in the eyes, you know. It's usually far more subtle, or it's when someone blinks at the end of a sentence, or it's when they inhale. Like, it's so small and so subtle, and they might not even be particularly aware of it, but it's whatever is going on in their head in that moment in time. That's what reaches through the screen. And ultimately what you're doing is you're telling a story. You're trying to make your audience feel things. You're trying to make your audience feel sad, feel excited, feel scared, and identify with the people that you have in front of them, even if they're not nice. You know, sometimes that can be the most interesting, when you don't like the character, but you can identify like with them, or travel on their journey with them. And yeah, they're the moments. But yeah, I think it's easy from a practical point of view to figure out, oh, we're on day 2 and this has happened, and that's all, you know, that's all just homework, you know. It's to do with the performance at that point, you know. If you're worrying about other stuff, then you just haven't kind of done what you need to do in advance, you know. Because your DP, your lighting, art, all those other things, they know what they're doing, you know. They're there because they're really good at what they do, and they're people you want to work with, and they're all working really hard to make the picture that's going to be ultimately on the screen the best it can be. And so it's sound, and it is camera, and the actor kind of is where the focus is a lot at that point. Now sometimes that changes. Sometimes you can be like, something will just jump out and you're like, oh. And I've had everything from like an actor saying, you know, I think a different shirt might be better, or, you know, that picture on the wall just doesn't feel right, or whatever. And that's brilliant, you know. And that can often, things like that happen all the time. That's fine. as long as you've given time, given the time you need to give to each of the departments and each of the people who are coming in. And they know better, like that's their job, that's what they do. So sometimes it's just like literally ticking a box and going, yeah. Unless there's a particular prop or something that's needed. But yeah, just given that time. So yeah, it's all about the actor once you get on set. That's the way I feel, you know. And yes, I want beautiful shots. I want the old slider, and I want this, and I want that. I want everything, and I want it all to happen in 2.5 minutes, so we can get. But you know, you can't do that. And there is those. If you plan those things in advance, they're there and it's ready to go, and you have the time. And I have directed in hybrid documentary, and that's completely different. And I was totally knocked sideways when I was doing it, because it's much more on the go, and you have to be watching all the time, and they put a huge amount of trust in the camera, because it's all about reactions, and it's real, so it's happening in real time. So so that's a whole other thing, you know. But I'll stick to, I think, to the scripted at the moment, because I'm still wading my way through the whole like documentary, you know, especially in very short amounts of time. But yeah, that would be my.
I have a quick question there, Roisin.
Yeah.
You mentioned there about takes, and you know, like if you take, you know, like I record music quite regularly, and you know, you kind of use, you know, you press the record button, and as soon as you do, you mess up, so you do it again, and again and again. But do you think there should be a cap on takes? You know, like there should be a certain limit, and is that a good idea? Since, you know, you mentioned about post-production, and if you put it off another day, that can ruin continuity. What's your opinion on that?
I think, like, realistically, you should be doing as few as you can, you know. Like, you have to have your coverage. I mean, it's obvious you're going to be doing your, you know, your forward, your reverse. You might want to get a mid, you might want to get a close-up, you might, you know, you need your wide to make sure you have something to go through. You know, you do all the stuff you know you have to do, and maybe you want a specific of things. But I mean, I've done it again. I've pushed the number of takes. Absolutely. And I've gotten sometimes the performance I wanted on a later take than I would have hoped for. You know, there's no point in saying, oh, well, that's it, we're not going to do anymore, because you know yourself in your head when you're watching. You know what's going to be the right one. You know what you're looking for out of it. But you just need to be aware that, you know, if you have camera, if someone's doing handheld on camera, and you have someone else holding a boom, and you have an actor going to really deep, dark places to pull out a performance, you can't keep asking them to go over and over and over again. You know, you just can't. It's not fair. So really, you just try and get there as quickly as you can. And like, we know sometimes like a take is great, but you know, focus pull wasn't right, or you know, a train passed, or whatever. It goes, you know, things that you can't help or you can't do anything about happen, and that's difficult. And yeah, you have to do a redo, or you have to go again. But realistically, you have to be aware of people. Like, you know, you don't. The last thing you need is exhausted, upset crew or actors. You know, everyone as much as possible should be having a good time, because they're all there for one reason, which is to make the best possible film, you know, because they believe in it, you know. Because I don't think anyone does anything for, you know, it's too hard work to do it for other reasons, I think. But yeah, you can't have, and I've seen that happen as well. Like, I saw a DOP drop and break her jaw because of exhaustion. Now, a long time ago, but you know, but it happened, and it shocked the hell out of me, you know. And I wasn't directing, but and you know, you can't do that to people. It's just not fair, you know. And particularly when you see someone, you know, who's moving handheld, because we all know there's people who cannot leave the set, and then there's people who are able to go in and out and take that breath every now and again. And like, they're all working incredibly hard, but whoever's on the camera and whoever's on the, you know, boom, sound recorders, they're not getting a break. And if an actor is in every scene, they're not getting a break. And a lot of the time that runs through lunch times, it runs through break times, it runs through everything, you know, because there's setup and there's lens changes to happen, there's this to happen, there's that to happen. And that's scheduling. You just have to make sure it's there, you know, and give people that time. But a cap, no, but a deep respect for the people around you and physically what is happening. And also you have to look at the clock, you know, people have homes to get to, and I was going to say light will be lost, which we all know. We've all been there and going, oh, quick. But yeah, no, it's, you know, when you have it, and it's incredibly difficult when you don't, but hopefully you'll be able to cheat it with what you do have. You could do a little close-up of nervous hands or something. And get away with it that way. Our reactions are great. Reactions are where it's all at, you know. And I think that's important for again, you don't want to be cleaning up messes in post-production. You want it all done on the day, so you're not like going back and trying to fix things or trying to put things right, because it's just not worth it, you know. I hate when I say, oh, and we actually had a running joke on Paddy when we were making that, because the editor was on set for 2 of the days, so all of us kept walking and going, we'll fix it in post, constantly, just to wreck us. But you don't want to be trying to fix anything in post, and you want to avoid having to reshoot or go out and get pickups or go out and get anything. It happens all the time, but the least you have to do, the best, you know, the better you're off you are. So yeah, that would be that piece.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, actually,
Sorry, Kelly, go on.
No, sorry, you go ahead.
No, I just didn't know that was a running joke that we fixed it in post. I thought that was an actual film.
Oh no, I have heard, no, people do say that. And it's like, if there's anything going to want me to be, it's like, is we'll fix it in post, because it's just like, no, we won't fix it in post, because fixing things in post takes 3 days.
Oh.
Whereas it will probably take you 10 minutes on set, you know. That's not where you want to be doing stuff. You want to be doing stuff where you are, and then as much as possible, you know. And I've had things fixed in post, a lot of things, particularly sound, and it's a nightmare. But you know, you're putting a whole lot of work onto someone if you don't do it there and then.
Go on, Kelly. Excuse me.
Oh, thank you. No problem. So I was wondering, this might be a bit of more of a vague question, but I was wondering if I could just like ask you about your own personal style, but how you implement like and honor your style as a filmmaker while also telling the story and pleasing the client or the producer or the executive, you know, pleasing the story in the way that's right for it.
Yeah.
Like, how do you manage both of those things?
I think like every individual project is very different. So what I imagine, or, you know, when you sit down and read a script, or if you're writing a script, how you imagine, how you visualize it, is obviously very, very different. You do need to talk to the person, you know, or the people around about how you see that. I would love to be able to draw. I would love to be able to do up, I forgot my name, mental blank, little boards, cartoons, visions of pictures of scenes, but I can't. I'm useless at it. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll go and I'll find photos and I'll find pictures and I'll do a mood board, or I'll pull stuff down, and or even if it's just for me, you know what I mean? look at each of the characters, try and figure out exactly who they are and how I want them to be portrayed, or how I feel they will be within, where the power lies within a scene, who is holding the power, who isn't, what in the characters in and around them, because it's so important that, their character is written on the walls, and all that sort of stuff. I think if people bring you on to direct, they, you can only go so far, and then it's like there kind of has to be one vision ultimately, and you can work with everyone around you, because that's what it is. It's completely a collaborative process, but ultimately the picture of what you're doing, it kind of has to be one vision. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to work as well, no matter what. And like, things change, obviously, like especially in post-production. I like, editors are genius. They're just brilliant. But yeah, I think you just have to sit down and break it down beforehand in advance, and make sure you both have the same ideas. Like, I was directing a thing for a French director, and it was during lockdown, and she couldn't come over here to shoot, and it's an American company, French director, and then I was directing the Irish leg, so it's someone else's vision, someone else's idea, another director's. And it turned out actually to be really enjoyable. I really liked doing it, because I could sit down with her, have a chat via Zoom, go through style, this, that, and the other, and then do the same with the DP here, sit down, talk through it, and off we went. And it worked out incredibly well. So I think once you can communicate that to anyone you're working with, I think you kind of be all right. And if that's the producer, or if it's an ad, if it's, the ad exec, or whatever person it is, our music video, and it's, a band, I think once you can sit down in advance and figure that out, you're going to be okay. But ultimately, once you get on, you kind of have to have one. You have to have one vision, and take everyone out, take things on board. Like, if a DP it's like, oh, I'd love to shoot it this way, yeah, go for it. I'll always go with them, because a lot of the time they'll have, it will work incredibly well. But just make sure you have exactly what you need, and then if you have the time and the space, it's great for actors to play around with stuff, or to try moving things in a slightly different way. But yeah, ultimately you do have to know, because it's like a 1,000-piece jigsaw, and it gets chucked onto the floor. You have to know you can fit them all together. And that's your job in advance, is to make sure that all those pieces can fit together before you go in. So yeah, do the work in advance, and it's usually not, I wouldn't say it's a problem in general. I think most people are fair, and be open and listen to people around you about what they feel. And yeah, that would be it. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure if it does or not.
Yeah, no, thank you. It did. Thank you.
So anyone else have any questions or queries? Or I'm trying to, I wrote a load of notes. I'm having a glance through here at the bottom of the screen to see. I suppose a lot of it is.
Are you working on anything right now?
I am in post production on a TV series, which is the Hybrid Doc, and then I'm writing on another project, on 2 other projects, and then I'm also mid-shoot on what would you call it? It's a piece of poetry.
Portrait film?
it's a piece of poetry on film, but it's
Yeah.
it's piece of poetry itself. It travels through moments in someone's life. So I'm shooting that, which is very different and very, like, I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? I don't know. And then because you are, like, obviously you have a poem, so you're trying to write a script based on a poem. The poem itself is quite long and I have a relatively short amount of time to shoot it. So how so how that works. And I'm not a fan of people talking, to camera, so it's trying to it's trying to use picture to tell the story of the poem. Like, you will hear the words, but a lot of it will be not, visually. At most of it, the actor wouldn't be speaking, but there are moments in time when they speak to camera right the way through. So yeah, a few very different things actually, which is kind of nice. But it's nice to be writing as well. It's nice to be sitting down and doing it, But I feel like it's coming into winter now, so I want to go into a little den and just be like scribbling away, not see anyone, stay in my pajamas and be at my laptop. But that's kind of where I'm aiming for in the next couple of weeks, is just to like finish up with a lot of other stuff and just like hide away and put on the earphones and just tap away.
A little retreat for yourself, a little retreat for all of us, probably, because we probably will want to go to script writing and get those films in pre-production.
Oh yes,
When we need it.
and actually that's one of them. Even when you're writing, I think the pre-production is so good. Like, it's so, because I've often, you get stuck, or you've written something and you're just like, just not as good as it should be, or it's not saying exactly what you want it to say, and again, that's sometimes that can be a pre-production thing as a writer, that you get the opportunity to hear it back and chat with the director or with whoever else is around you and go, it's a light bulb moment. Go, yeah, that's it. That's exactly what, Yeah, it's a team sport, and we all kind of have to play together when it comes to making stuff. And I know there's people who are out there who who write, direct, edit themselves, do all of that, and that's amazing. I wouldn't be able to. Especially I think in when it gets to post-production, because that's when I get scared when I do paper edits. Even for myself, I'll do paper edits and pass them along. But yeah, no, I think you have to, because sometimes what you think is there isn't all there, especially if it's unscripted. If you're working in an unscripted area, things can happen, but either maybe it's not on camera, or maybe it isn't shot the way you thought it was shot, or it's not going to fit for some other reason, or whatever happens. So that's when I think editing can come into its own, because ultimately I can have the whole story in my head of what I think is there, but that may not, especially if you're using multi-camera, which was the last time. Like, you have all different cameras going and you don't know for sure what you have until you get to sit down and watch it back again,
Especially in a big production, I presume. I think we've gone a little bit over time, but I think we can squeeze one more little question in there, or more if anyone has, whoever. I'm sure I'm sure you're okay with that, Roisin, are you?
I'm quite happy with that. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the questions. Thank you, Kelly, as well. It was lovely to chat to you. I love it. I love getting questions, because I think sometimes I don't know what people actually want to know. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it can be difficult. But no, it was really, really lovely talking to everyone. And thank you very, very much to Her Film Festival. I'm delighted part of it. And best wishes for your live gig